Leroy, come here. Come here, buddy. Come here, Leroy. Come here, bud. Hey, you ready to go do a camshaft install? Huh? Let's get that Texas Speed Bald Eagle cam in. How about you, Lacey? You ready? Let's go do it.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I'm going to start out a new channel here. We're going to do a whole bunch of stuff with a new project I just picked up. It's a 2010 Camaro SS with a stick, so it's got the LS3 in it. It is bone stock to this point, other than some catback mufflers from GM Performance, as well as a cheap K&N cold air kit that I'm probably going to have to replace as well after talking to my tuner. But the projects I have in store for us over the next several videos are going to be a set of long tube headers from Texas Speed with off-road connection pipes, and then a Bald Eagle cam from Texas Speed in honor of Leroy the Savage from Cleetus McFarland. So without further ado, I'm going to show you guys a little bit more.
And one more thing before we get started. There's no other way to do any type of project involving bald eagles without getting yourself a Bartles skeet to start out any project with. Let's do this, guys.
Here we go. Oh yeah, that's good. Now let's get started.
All right, here's the good stuff. Texas Speed long tube headers, off-road connection pipes, got fire sleeves. I know most of you guys aren't running those, but I thought I'd rather be safe than sorry, just a little upgrade. New exhaust manifold gaskets, timing cover gasket, front main seal, water pump gaskets, exhaust clamps, O2 extensions, some push rods, dual valve springs, the heart of this, the new camshaft, basically a stage 2 camshaft, but with just a little bit less lift. Also got the ARP crank bolt, ARP cam bolts, and the new 3-bolt sprocket that's going to go in with the cam as well. Check out this beautiful engraving on this camshaft. That way everybody knows I'm running Bald Eagles only.
All right guys, let me show you where we are on this thing. All of the spark plugs were permanently attached to the spark plug wires because someone didn't put dielectric grease on the probes on the ceramic, and so they melted to the wire.
Let me send this out as a warning to everybody who changes their own spark plugs. Do not install spark plugs and new spark plug wires without putting the right dielectric grease on the plug wires and the plug. All right guys, quick update on where I stand. I finally got those last spark plugs out. Also got the plug wires out, of course, that come with them. They were a beating. So I ended up, the 10 snips didn't work to cut through the heat shield. So what I had to do was put a piece of wood against the valve cover. Obviously I took the coil packs off, put a piece of wood against the valve cover so I wouldn't dent it, and then use my channel locks to grab the edge of the heat shield and pry it off against the valve cover with a piece of wood on it, and end up tearing up the springs on it, which is no big deal because I'm going to use different heat shields when I put the things back in. And then yeah, and then destroyed the spark plugs as well. So at least they came out of the combustion chambers. I was really concerned that these spark plugs might have seized inside there as well, but they all came out with pretty much ease. So good to go there. Now I just got to do the other side, and hopefully it doesn't take me another 4 hours like this side took. All of these plug wires are broken. They're all melted onto the porcelain on the plugs. So I've had to yank the plug wires out.
there's not enough room to get grip on the heat sleeves like there was on the other side. So I'm attempting to take off the passenger side manifold to get more grip. However, this one back here, second to the back, doesn't have enough room to get the header bolt out. So I've decided to go ahead and lift the car in the air and see if I can get the headers out from below and maybe give me a little bit more room to get this last bolt out from the top. And we'll see what happens. So right now, I'll back up for you. I've got the car in the air. It's hovering over ramps. Right now I've got jack stands under the main lift points and my jack partially supporting the front end just for a little bit of extra peace of mind. And then of course if something happens and they drop, then it shouldn't fall too far because I got the ramps under the tires, and so I'll just have the suspension droop to keep me safe. But let's get under there and let's see if I can get the headers off from below. All right, I'm getting pretty excited now. I think I'm making my first bit of progress. I got the passenger side exhaust manifold off with the cat attached and the O2 sensors. Came right out with a little bit of pulling. Obviously the driver's side was a little bit easier. I'd already removed the exhaust manifold, so I just had to get that mid pipe off with the cats and the O2 sensors. But now you can see I'm looking at a lot more room to be able to work with those heat shields and what's left of the plug wires. Hopefully I can get a grip on those and pull those out. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and put the car back on the ground and get to work. See you soon. All right guys, I think I got this figured out. The way I was able to get the heat shields and the rest of the wires out from underneath was to use a pair of 45-degree needle nose pliers and get them right under this little groove right here next to the spark plug. There's a little groove that you can get underneath the tip, the edge of the heat shield. And then I use the leverage of the head to bend it out a little bit. Once I got it about 1/4 of an inch away, it opened up enough where I could put my hand on it from underneath the car and pull that out. All right guys, I think I've got everything ready. All the mating surfaces are kind of cleaned up just a little bit for new gaskets. I've got the off-road pipes in place. I'm not sure if I'm gonna need to take those off or not, but I've got them in place for now. You can see them down there. Ready to lift the car back up off the ground a little bit higher. And time to get to these bad boys. The Texas Speed, long tube headers, 1 7/8 inch. Can't wait to see how it looks once it's on there. Guys, that was extremely easy to get the header into place. I'll note a couple of things that you're gonna hear from other people on the internet. A lot of people say you need to remove this steering shaft to get the headers in. That wasn't the case with my install. Of course, there's variances and tolerances to how things are put together, but I was easily able to get it around the steering shaft without taking that apart. And if you do have to take it apart, it's not that big of a deal. The other thing I did was, like I said earlier, I did put the mid pipe on, the off-road mid pipe. And that served out to be a good for me doing this on my own because I could fit the header into the off-road connection pipe, and that's holding it in place right now. And it's just slip fitted right now, attached to the rest of the exhaust. That'll give me enough room to play around with it up here, get the gasket in and put a couple bolts in before I start tightening everything down. Hey guys, one of my favorite part of any jobs is flipping the wrench around. You know what I'm talking about. Now we're ready to tighten up some header bolts. All right, got the header bolts tightened. They're just snug right now. I have not torqued them down. I will torque them to spec when I'm done. All right guys, we're back to installing the passenger side header. Trying to do it by myself again, like I did the driver's side, but running into a little bit more problems because there's not much room to work with. So let me show you what I'm trying to do here now. I've got a bar, a piece of wood, across the top of
the engine bay, and I've got a ratchet webbing strap across the wood tied to the back two tubes on the header. And I'm trying to lift the header up into place to align a couple of bolts to get started. And right now I'm struggling with trying to keep the back end of the header supported. So I'm gonna use this old school jack stand. That's all I have left to put underneath the off-road pipe and the back of the header to hopefully hold it in place and keep it supported up as I pull the header up. We'll see if I can keep it on there. Maybe it'll slip, maybe it won't, but here goes nothing. All right, I think it's gonna work. I got the old farmer jack underneath the header in the back, holding it up with two blocks underneath it, barely hanging into the clamps right now, but it's still in there. And I'll show you what I was able to do. I was able to get this thing up here high enough to where I could get two bolts started. That's not enough light. I could get two bolts started right there and right there. Just enough. I got probably 4 or 5 threads in on each one. So while I still got it supported, I'm gonna see if I can get the rest of the header bolts started, and then should be able to tighten them up in sequence. All right, we're back under the car now. I'm just showing you where I attach the O2 extensions. The one on the passenger side seems a little excessive, doesn't need to be that long. In fact, it's so long that I had to tie it all the way back here next to the transmission on the little tabs that are on there to tie down harnesses and things like that. I think I could have actually plugged in the stock cable back into its original connector without using the extension on this side. But since it was so far up there and kind of hard to reach, I went ahead and left it and just tied it back here. In case I need to change an O2 sensor in the future, it'll be a lot easier to reach this plug than the one that's up there in the engine bay. Let's roll over to the other side here. This side definitely needed an extension. As you can see, hopefully you can see that. Way up there where that blue is, that's where the factory connector is. The extension runs all the way down here, and I've hooked it up to the side of the transmission next to the rear O2 sensor connector for back here, and then that plugs directly into the O2 sensor as well. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you can see that from here. And then just to get a quick shot of the headers hanging out under the car, they're absolutely beautiful. I love the way long tubes look underneath the car. We could see everything coming into the collector. Looks way better than that factory pipe with those cat mid pipes attached to them. All right, guys, I'm back here again. Now here comes some of the fun stuff. We're gonna do the cam install. We're gonna first start by tearing down everything, getting to where we need to be, draining the fluids, the coolant, getting the fan out, getting the radiator out. We'll take the valve covers off, timing cover, everything off the front of the motor, all the accessories, so that way we can get to where we need to get to, pull the old cam out, get the new cam in. I've done this before on an LM7 motor. In fact, I still have some of the old parts laying around in my garage. But I've been watching some videos on YouTube. I want to send a shout out to @Will. He puts together a great video. It's probably about 45 minutes long or so, but very in-depth. He's out there with his buddies, and they're putting a cam in one of his buddies' cars. He does a great job. I actually learned a couple things from him on how to keep the valves up while you're installing the new springs. And so I'm going to try that method here. The method I've used in the past when I've done this is I will use an air compressor and a fitting into the spark plug hole in the cylinder head, and I'll pump air with an air compressor into the cylinder to hold the valves up while I take the old springs off, put the new ones on. But I'm going to try his method of rotating the motor, getting the piston up to hold the valves up, and give me a little bit more peace of mind that my air compressor doesn't go out, or something like that, and causes those valves to drop, because that'd be a pain to have to pull the heads just to do a cam swap. But
bear with me. I'm gonna get some things tore down. Hopefully I'll be able to video a little bit more of the process of what I'm doing here, and then we'll get back to you. All right, guys, got the coolant draining. As you can see, I'm a responsible citizen, draining it into a receptacle. And then I've already taken the belt off. Very simple. Got a tensioner pulley here. I'm gonna twist it clockwise, which is gonna push it in. I'm gonna slide it off and pull the belt out. After the coolant drain, I'm gonna take the hoses off to the radiator, disconnect the fan harnesses, and get the bolts that hold the radiator in place up here. And on the other side, disconnected, and I'll be able to pull the radiator out. That'll give me enough room in the front of the engine to slide the old cam out and the new one in. As far as the front of the engine goes, obviously we're taking the water pump off. We got to take the I got to take that belt off down there for the AC as well. Gonna have to take the balancer off. Hey guys, time for another update. So I've cleared out the radiator, the fans, and gotten the hoses and the water pump out of the way. Time to continue the teardown, but first I want to show you some things. The transmission coolant lines, you know, some of the other guys on the internet probably do this a little bit better than I do. I know Get At It Will takes these lines off up here close to the engine as opposed to at the radiator. I found it hard to get to down there, so I went ahead and took them off at the radiator instead, but it uses the same process that he talks about. You pull these plastic clips off, and then there's a little metal pin, a snap that goes into the connector that you can just pop off with a pick. One of the things I'll show you guys real quick is, and you'll notice this when you do this, your transmission fluid will come out of the radiator because it goes through there to get cooled. So I've got these vacuum line caps that I just had lying around. So I just stuck those in there kind of halfway, stop the flow, and then and it's not really gonna come out of the hoses, it's just gonna come out of here. But I went ahead and put tape around the end of the hoses coming out of the engine still, out of the transmission. And then there's those little metal clips that clip around that ring. You'll just use a little pick. All right guys, back for more. So I went ahead and pulled the crank bolt out. It's a manual transmission, so I went ahead and just stuck it in 4th gear, and I don't have an impact wrench, so I put a breaker bar on it with a 24mm socket and just worked it real slowly counterclockwise to break the bolt loose, and then got it out. It came out pretty easy. Then you can just twist it out by hand. Okay, crank pulley's off. Now I'm ready to take the timing cover off. As others noted on the internet, you will have a problem getting out this timing cover bolt that's back behind the alternator bracket. It's hard to see right now, the light's not really good. It's down there next to the the cam sensor. So as others have mentioned, you do need to take out the bolts that hold in this alternator bracket. You're gonna take out the one that's up here. Right here and right here. And then you're gonna loosen this one right here. You don't need to take this one out because this one just holds the alternator into the bracket. Once you loosen this and take out the other two, you'll see you can pivot this out of the way, and then you should have plenty of access to get that final bolt off of the timing cover, and then remove your sensor, and the cover should come off pretty easily. All right, I went ahead and loosened up the bolts on the top of the valve covers. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this, but I'm gonna have to order a new seal kit, and that usually comes with gaskets as well. So I'm gonna order new valve cover gaskets and these grommets that go in the top of the valve cover bolts. You can see they're supposed to, oh, I didn't get that one all the way out. They're supposed to, these rubber grommets are supposed to stay in the valve cover, and these are kind of worn out, so I figure I'm gonna go ahead and replace them as well. They're supposed to be more like that one, how it's kind of stuck in there and it kind of holds the bolt in place. All right guys, I got the front timing cover off. It was a little tricky, and I think I told you guys before, this is kind of a high mileage motor. It's got about 130,000 miles on it, so gaskets are kind of stuck and things like that. What I did, and hopefully this is helpful to some, is to be able to pry the
cover off, I got a 45 angle needle nose and stuck it under the corner here where the cover protrudes from the sealing surface, and then very carefully put it against where the port is for the water pump, and just was very cautious not to mar this surface up any, and just very carefully popped it off that way. And then I could go over here to this side and do the same thing, and that gave me enough leverage to pull the cover off the rest of the way. Again, I was very careful, and you want to be careful if you use that method, not to scuff the surface of that mating surface where the water pump meets. Also got the valve covers off the rest of the way. Some of this plastic wire loom cover is a little brittle, so you want to be very careful when you pull that off. And you can see I've got a couple little specks in here, a couple little specks down here where you can see where that plastic has kind of broken off and has fallen down into the valve train. So on this side, you have even more to worry about because of the way the harness is wrapped around the head. So I went ahead and got some saran wrap and wrapped it up as best I could just to keep most of the debris out. And then when I move the fuel line back and forth out of the way, hopefully it won't knock any of that debris loose. All right, guys, rockers are out of the way. It's time to pull the push rods out. I'll be replacing those with some Texas Speed hardened push rods. All right, everyone's got all sorts of creative ideas on how to hold this tensioner back. People use paper clips or a little small pick or something like that. I didn't have a pick small enough to fit in this front hole, and I got a little nervous using a paper clip because that tensioner is really tight, and I was worried about getting that stuck in there. So what I did was I used a really small Allen key. That way I can get all the way through to the backside and make sure it's in there really good. And that'll keep it up. That'll keep it tight while I'm working on the cam. All right, hopefully you can see what we're looking at here. I got the AC condenser out of the way. I've got it held up with a strap, and that gave me enough room to slide the dowel rods in. I used some pretty long dowel rods, so I had to slip them through the front of the grill to get them all the way back there, but they are in the back of the motor, all the way back there. And then now I'm ready to pull the old cam out and get the new cam in with some lube on there. So I'll come back to you once I get this out. All right, I did confirm the older style plate that has the hex head bolts on it requires 18 foot-pounds on the bolts. The newer style plate with the flat head Torx bit requires 11 foot-pounds. Now, the bolts come from the factory with thread locker on them, and I didn't put thread locker on them going back in the first time. So I'm glad I checked the internet, got some recommendations, and went ahead and put some of this trusty blue on there, and just a couple drops on each bolt, retorqued them each to 11 foot-pounds, and hopefully that holds it. We'll see. And of course, before I put the new ARP cam bolts in, just want to double check my timing, and I've got everything set up right. The sprocket, the cam sprocket is on there really loose. You can see the arrow at the bottom of the cam sprocket. It's really hard to see on video, the crank indicator, but you know what you're looking at if you've done this before. There's a little dot on that tooth down there that's lined straight up. So once I get this thing in place, it should be all in time and ready to go. Hey guys, we're back. I got the other parts I needed from the parts store, including the grommets for the valve covers, and I also got my comp cams tool that I'm going to use, and I'll show you that in just a minute, to change the valve springs. But first I want to show you what I'm doing to the crank bolt. I put a white mark on the crank bolt with the timing indicator lined up on the timing chain, on the timing gear at the 6 o'clock position, and the crank gear at the 12 o'clock position, which puts number 1 and number 6 at top dead center. I also created a diagram for each piston to show which one's at top dead center, and I'm going to go through that as I as I do the process. All right, guys, gonna try to do some live footage here of replacing these first 2 valve springs on cylinder number 1. Let's see if all my estimations work out. These valves should stay put while I tighten this down. I'm just gonna keep going down. I don't want to lose these. Go ahead and grab, use my magnet. Be very careful not to lose these guys. You want to make sure you grab them with a magnet. Sorry about that, guys. My camera took a spill, so I'm going to try to reset here. I got the retainers out, so now it's time to back this off. Take out the valve springs for number 1. The instructions on the comp cams tool is very specific, and all the reviews I read online were specific as well. Very particular about greasing and using the supplied lube on the bolt every time you use it. And that probably goes with every cylinder. You want to put new lube on it. I've heard that these threads can strip very easily, so you're going to want to make sure that there's an appropriate lube on there every time. So we get these guys out here. That's loose enough. Go. Back that thing out as far as it'll go. All right. Then you're going to want to take off these valve seals. Some of them are a little bit harder than others to get off, but they should come off pretty easy. Okay, got the new valve seals soaking in oil a little bit here. Help them go on a little bit easier. It's good to get a little bit of oil inside. Help them slip on those valves a little bit cleaner. I'm just gonna get these situated, and then I'm gonna get a socket that'll fit around here and tap those into the base. All right. Yeah, okay, that'll fit. Grab a hammer. That's solid. And just double check. Solid. All right, 2 valve springs. All right, we got those in place. There we go. See if we can line that up. Just checking that I'm on the valve seat. Everything looks square. Make sure I'm not going to nick the top of the valve. There we go.
All right, I think I got the retaining locks in place. I had to use a little pry bar and pry up against the bottom of the spring on the exhaust side just to get enough clearance on both sides. Just got to be very careful not to make marks on the inside of your cylinder heads. So I think I'm going to loosen these up slowly, loosen this bolt up slowly, and make sure that they stay in their groove as I'm backing out. All right, guys, I'm back. Got all the springs in. I got the rockers in, and I turned over the engine multiple times to get each valve closed and torqued each rocker down to the proper specs, 22 foot-pounds. I didn't film this, but I do want to go ahead and tell you guys, I ran into a problem on this side again. I dropped a valve keeper. It popped out, fell down. It took me 2 hours to find it. All right, guys, valve covers are on, snug down to 8.5 foot-pounds about. Some of them are hard to get to, so you're gonna have to just do it by feel, but it's not that difficult. The next thing, I'm gonna put this timing cover on. I did a couple things to it. One, I replaced the front seal, put a new seal in there. You can see it's a lot more flexible and ready to go in. On the bottom of the timing cover, you'll notice that there's a little corner on each side where the factory puts in some sealant to seal where the oil pan meets. You just have to be careful to scrape all that off and get it down to a smooth surface on all the mating surfaces. And you'll also want to do that down here in these corners. Get those surfaces nice and cleaned up. And then the rest of the face of these mounting surfaces, I'm just going to wipe down with a paper towel now. I've already scuffed them just a little bit with some emery paper and the water pump jackets and the timing cover mounting surface. So I'm just going to wipe it down with a paper towel. I'll be ready to put a little bit of sealant in those corners and then loosely fit the timing cover until I can get the harmonic balancer on to center it, and then I'll tighten the timing cover down to its appropriate torque specs. All right, guys. Got the crank pulley on. It was a bear to get on. I'll show you what I had to do. I've got this crank pulley installer tool that I've used probably 4 or 5 times on other engines. And I got the crank pulley on about 3/4 of the way, and it would stop and it wouldn't spin anymore. And I realized my problem was this one thread right here. You can see it's a little shiny. Got a little bit gummed up, and it provided enough friction that I couldn't get this bolt that pushes these washers and that bearing cap down to tighten it down. So what I ended up doing was I used the stock bolt, and I put some of the ARP thread lube on it, and I could get it in there probably about 6 or 7 threads as far as I got the pulley down. And so I used that to tighten it the rest of the way down. Now that I've got it all the way in and snug, I'm going to use the ARP bolt, fancy ARP bolt with the proper lube and proper torque spec, and I'm going to torque it down the rest of the way. Time for another update, guys. I got the balancer in, got it all torqued down to about 190 foot-pounds, which is hard to do because my torque wrench only goes up to 160. So I set it past 160, 2 full turns, which is supposed to be about 180. And then I pulled it another 10 degrees past that. So I'm hoping that's about 190. And then I put the coil packs on, plugged them in, tightened those down. I got the water pump on. I got hoses connected. So I'm struggling with this one clamp on the water pump, trying to get it past the nipple on the end of the water pump. It's not staying in place. These clips are supposed to be designed to where if you squeeze them all the way, there's a little catch that will allow you to squeeze it past. And then you can use a screwdriver to pry it open and it'll lock in place. But this one's not catching for some reason, and it's not giving me enough slack to be able to get over that edge. So I'm gonna keep working on that. Afterwards, I'm going to get the belts on. Then I've got to do plugs and wires and the dipstick and the intake, the air intake. Once we finish with that, should be ready to start it up and see if this thing runs. Keeping my fingers crossed that it will. All right, we got the belts on, water pump, of course. All the hoses are connected. Finally fixed that one clamp there on the water pump hose. Got the air intake back on. Right now what I'm struggling with is the dipstick tube. So if any of you guys have ever been through this before, you know that it's a pain. Every vehicle I've worked on where I've pulled the dipstick out, it's hard to get it back in the spot. So I've had to relook at a diagram to understand where it goes, understanding that it goes in between these two header pipes, and then twisting it up and aligning it underneath. So what I'm doing now is I've lifted the car in the air, and I'm gonna crawl under there with the light on and see how close I am to the hole where the dipstick tube goes. And hopefully that'll work pretty easily. So we'll try this out and see you guys in a minute. All right, we're getting close. Next time you see this thing, it's gonna be time to turn the key and get it running. We got a couple things left to do. We got brand new spark plugs, new spark plug wires, as of course remember, those were all damaged during the installation. Also got a nice tube of dielectric grease, help that install go easy. And you'll notice on the new MSD plug wires, I've also got Texas Speed fire sleeves, which should keep them insulated pretty good. After that, last thing will be filling up the radiator with coolant and water, and then giving it a start. Let's turn the key and let's see if it works. Oh boy, fingers crossed. First start up, here we go. Adventure this was. Got a little smoke coming off the headers, got a little oil on there that needs to burn off. Thing looks good on this side. Doesn't look like any leaks. I still gotta put more coolant in the radiator. Get all the bubbles out there. A little more smoke on this side. Looking good though, looking good. Do a little inspection. I'm gonna walk around, check under the car, make sure there's no exhaust leaks or anything like that. Tighten anything up that might be loose. But other than that, she's alive. All right, now time to go to the tuner. I'll let you guys know how it goes, and I'll be recording that as well. See you soon.